Hi, and welcome to our program. Today we are doing a tour around the Viking Aarhus, but first, let's start with the Viking Museum. Let's go. Hi, Arthur.
Hello, Ruud.
Nice to see you.
Nice to meet you again.
Thanks for having us.
You're welcome.
What are you going to show us today?
Today I'll be showing you the Viking Museum here in Aarhus inner city, which is a very interesting museum because it's an on-site museum, which means that most of the objects you'll be seeing down in the museum here have been found at that exact location.
Oh, okay.
And the way you can tell it is that there's usually a red square underneath or something red to indicate it.
Okay.
And the reason this museum is an on-site museum is because Aarhus, which was known as Aarhus in the Viking days, has had a very interesting development history throughout the Middle Ages and up to today. Because in other major cities, like maybe an example could be some of the old medieval cities down in Central Europe, you can still enter and see the old buildings from medieval times.
Okay.
But the Vikings decided that instead of building next to the buildings, next to the old city, instead they built on top of it, which means that all of the old Viking ruins and objects and so on and so forth are underneath the main center of Aarhus, which also means that every time you dig there, you find new objects from the Viking age, which is very, very interesting.
Okay. Is there any particular reason why they did that and they did not just construct on the site?
It might be because terrain elevation changes throughout time, because usually a lot of different things are being thrown out. It's like human waste, of course from ourselves, but also from the things we eat and old tools, which creates different kinds of elevation in the terrain throughout time. And then you have to lift everything up, because then you could say the ground is not that stable anymore. It's about 3 to 4 meters underneath. Aarhus was located 1,000 years ago, which you also can see on the stairs down here. You can see the elevation of the city throughout the last 1,000 years.
Okay. How do you calculate exactly how big are the jumps?
It's the work of geologists. I'm not that familiar with the work, but I know they can probe the ground and see different layers from different sorts of ages and make many different kinds of tests. About the soil, which shows different types, maybe of events. It could have been a harsh winter, or maybe if a volcano.
So it's not necessarily something that you very clearly see. If you need to do the
only
analysis.
It's I would say very qualified guesses. Only the red one from 1950 they are very sure about. So this is
this is the only certainty. No certainties more. Okay.
These are very, I would say, good estimated guesses.
Okay.
And as you can see, the city was much further down 1,000 years ago in the Viking age than it is today. So it's about the 3 to 4 meters that we went down the stairs. And here's a little snippet of what it looks like all around us underneath.
Is this an actual piece, or did you put some addresses to look at?
I am actually uncertain.
Okay.
I don't know.
Because that seems like a lot of things.
It's a lot of things. It might seem too perfect, which is why I suspect it's actually...
makes sense.
Yeah, but it's not unusual to find these things all around here if you start digging. You might not find this many things, but you might find some of these things. And as you can see, it's quite a lot of different things. It might be a shoe, an old leather shoe that someone used and discarded. Yeah, I think it's a shoe. Or just a piece of leather for something that you might use as a tool. But you also have bones, either from animals or maybe humans, which shows that people in the olden days up here in the north, they didn't have sewage systems. So what they would do is they would in this bucket here, they would
put everything.
Everything. Okay. And also
even dead people, didn't they have
Oh no, not dead people.
Okay.
Just
but dead animals.
Yeah, dead animal bones, old things you had to throw out. Also their own filth.
Okay.
Because you didn't have toilets in that way, and you would throw it out on the street, which would inevitably lead to these elevations, and then you had to build around it and remove it and so on and so forth. Also for strategic reasons. Yeah, it's kind of funny in a way.
Really weird also.
Yeah. This is a bit of a meta question. How old is your segment that views this?
A segment, sorry?
The age of the people who watch your programs usually.
It's 18 to 30.
Oh, then I can say shit and stuff like that. Yeah, it's people's to say it like very, very
Plainly.
yeah, plainly, it's shit and piss in
Okay.
sort of way that a lot of this is.
Nice.
And that's just how it is.
Nice.
Which is
Fun.
also a bit disgusting for us modern people in some sort of way.
Yeah.
And what we've tried to do is like make a recreation of, you could say, it's probably our best guess at what Viking Aarhus would have looked like. This is from 1960. And as you can see, it's a fortress town. And that's because the old Danish kings, they lost Hedeby, which is a very important trade city down to the south. And so he decided to fortify his two remaining important trade cities, which were Ribe and Aarhus today. And so before, this part of the river didn't exist. So they decided to extend the natural river, and also this is the river you still can see today. This is where all the cafes are, and like
in this part.
Yeah, this exact place here. All the cafes will be placed around here.
So weird.
Which we will see later if we go outside. Yeah. Then I can pinpoint some exact locations. So they decided to fortify it by augmenting it with two fake rivers, and thus like creating this human-made island, which made it into a fortress city. And by creating this,
how did they manage to do this? Like to separate the river and
over here, which is where Magasin is today. It was a swamp area, and swamps are usually not something you'd like. They are not very good for growing crops.
For anything.
For anything at all, actually. And so they used the material here by clearing the swamp and these areas to build the hill, which later received a wooden palisade on it.
Okay, so basically they were just transporting the things to make this
Exactly.
barrier, and then it kind of, not naturally, but maybe it was just way more intuitive for the river.
This place here in front of Magasin, this road there is today, is called Immerwald, which is sort of German. And Immer means always in German. And Val might be vadested in Danish, a crossing. So the always crossing. So before, when it was a swamp, there might have been water here, but not a lot. But it was where you could cross into the city from, which is why it's called Immerwald, always crossing. And then they augmented that and made it into an actual like river, like this.
That's interesting. So does the name go all the way back to this time?
That's a very difficult question to answer. No, it's a good question. It's very difficult because the Vikings didn't write a lot of things down. It's usually on giant rune stones, if we have anything like Jellingesten, where they decide to write something down, or the mask stone, which we have out in Moskva. It was primarily when the monks came that they decided to write down write about the Vikings, but it's not something we're really sure about. Also, we will see later a street called Guldsmedsgade, which means goldsmith street. But this idea of naming streets after jobs was first something they did in Aarhus in the Middle Ages, so that can also help us with this. But it's very interesting that they've decided to keep this very German-sounding name of a street, while all the other streets surrounding it are called like Frederiksgade or Rosengade, which is very Danish and not very German like this.
Maybe they're just like embracing the past?
Yeah, maybe. It's very interesting, but I think it's kind of beautiful in sort of way that the past still in some way lingers in the future. So, as you also can probably see, it's a fishing town. The first time we've suspect anything like some sort of settlement was here in the areas around the year 700, in the 700s. Which was just a tiny fishing village, which was probably situated around here since the ocean is out there. And then it grew over time. And as a little fun fact, this city here in 960 has 500 inhabitants. Do you know how many there are in Constantinople at this moment?
No. It said 500.
500.
No.
And Constantinople is Istanbul in Turkey today. There's 500,000 at this point of time. So 500 in probably the largest city in Denmark at this point of time, maybe the second largest or third largest, versus Constantinople, which have 500,000 people. Which also shows that in many ways the Vikings lived like in the periphery of the known world of civilization and so on and so forth, because it's very cold and it's very far away from many things. But people did still live here and they did thrive. And they became great warriors, which raided and pillaged everywhere.
Yay!
Yeah.
Great.
But there are a few things that the archaeological finds have, it has made us confused. Because if I told you this is a fortress city, what is it missing then? Can you see it?
The fortress?
Yes, exactly. There's no fort inside of this. We haven't found anything. It's kind of weird that you would make this into a fortress city and not have a fort.
Okay.
So where would you put your garrison?
Okay.
What we suspect, and this is highly suspected, is there's no like hardcore proof on it, that they might have had a garrison to the north up here, where they would move people out if there came an enemy that was too strong to beat and defend.
Okay.
Because we found a few pieces of smithing gear and a few kilns, which might suggest that they've made some weapon up there, which would be a pretty good place to put weapon production if you have a garrison or a fort there in any sort of way.
But was this like procedure also observed in other cities, like other fortress cities around? Did they also separate the fortress, or?
No, usually they keep it inside the city, which is it's why it's left us with so many questions. It seems a kind of weird thing to do.
Yeah.
But
was there like a particular reason why this city would be attacked or something like this?
It was a major trade hub. And it had it has one very natural good defense for your ships, because this river leads all the way into Brabrand Lake today.
Yeah. Okay.
So you would, if you saw an enemy, and the way they would see enemies is they would use beacons, and not beacons in like video games where they pop up in the sky and show you where you have to go. These are like giant bonfires where you would see the smoke and then you would lit it. It's like in the Lord of the Rings, in the third movie, where Condor calls for aid to Rohan, and you see this beautiful vista of mountains where fires are lit up, and you see people react to these fires.
Okay. So that was like the form of communication?
Yeah, they would be lined all the way around the coast, so when you'd see an invasion fleet, you would light the bonfires, which would give people time to escape, and but also move all of these valuable ships far away into the lake, and thus hide them from a probable invader.
Yeah.
But then there's a problem, because you can see here, there's a bridge. So how would you move these ships into the river and further into the lake if you have a bridge? It would be in the way.
Yeah.
So what we suspect they did is that they have like a folding bridge, which would do like this sort of motion.
That's quite
and
advanced.
We haven't found this type of bridge here. We haven't actually really found anything that would suggest a bridge is there. But you have to do it because there's no crossing for a very long time, naturally, for this river. And how would you go down to the south then? And so we suspect they had this technology because in the rest of Europe, they had this ability to create bridges that could do like this. And that's what we suspect that they also used here.
Okay, but you said that they were a bit isolated from the world, so how would they learn how to do it?
I mean, isolate is probably the wrong word, because of course they went out and exploring and so on and so forth. And trade did flourish and did come up here, but relative to like Central Europe, there weren't that many people, so in that sort of way isolated. Okay.
And what is kind of the structure inside? Like, can you identify like what is what? Like, what is residential? What is like, I don't know, important kind of institution?
We have some guesses. So here in Aarhus, yes, it's from my colleagues in archaeology. They tell me a lot that it's a lot of qualified guesses you make, but they might be very close to the truth. So what we suspect is that because here in Aarhus you have a very strong wind from the west, they will probably put all of their fishing equipment and fishing posts and so on out here to the east, because then the smell of the fish wouldn't enter the city and would smell horrible everywhere. Smart. But that has also confused us, because up here in the northwest, in this area, there's been found kilns and things of smithing as well. Okay. But these roofs are made of biomaterial. like hay, which you can see over there. We have made a recreation of like what's called a grubehus, which was one of the poorer houses.
Yeah.
And if there's a strong west wind and you have fires here,
things are gonna go bad.
Probably, yeah. There might have been some times where houses have lit on fire.
Okay.
Which is
But if that
confuses
happens
us.
a couple of times, then they would maybe consider changing?
Maybe. It's very, very weird. Sometimes the past can be, but you can just sometimes look at decisions we make today about how our cities are constructed and people just live with it.
Yeah, that is true. That is a very good
So
point.
it might just be that they've like, it's always been like this, and those that live here, yeah, that's tough luck. Maybe it doesn't happen that much, we don't know.
Yeah.
But it's quite confusing.
Okay, is it always confusing, or is
No, not always
particularly confusing?
This is just kind of weird.
Okay.
This is like exceptionally weird.
Okay.
Also, creating a fortress city and
Without
not having
the
a fort,
fortress.
yeah, that's also kind of weird.
So Aarhus is just weird.
Kind of weird, yeah. But Aarhusianer today are still kind of weird.
Nice. And then the city continued into there?
So this has probably been a farming area. They would of course have agriculture to sustain themselves and crops and so on and so forth. And you wouldn't put it inside the city, there wouldn't be space for it. So they would exit this western gate, go over the crossing, and then come out to like where there were probably a few farmsteads and where they would have their crops. So it's a natural part of the city, even though it's not inside of the city. They would use this a lot. This is also where they would bury their dead. You wouldn't bury the dead inside of the city, because that would the dead would go rotten.
Yeah, that wouldn't be nice.
No, because it would infect the drinking water underneath, and it would contaminate it, and you would get all sorts of diseases. It's very illegal.
Everyone would die.
Yeah, everyone would die. So we suspect they buried them out here at the old Aarhus Library, which isn't a library anymore, because we found a Viking grave over there.
What is it now?
I think there's a restaurant.
Okay.
I think it's been turned into like some sort of recreational center with quite a few things. It's very close to Aarhus.
Okay, so it's not really possible to investigate further.
No, probably not, unless they want to like remake it or rebuild it or something.
Okay, so is that the reason why there are like so many guesses and nothing like very concrete, because you cannot really continue the investigation unless you want to tear the whole city apart?
I think if you'd ask archaeologists, what they would like is to blow up the entire mid-city, and so they could be allowed to dig in it, but that would be very problematic, yes.
Yeah.
I also think that it's very hard to say anything concrete about people in the past, no matter who they are, and especially if you're an archaeologist. I have the privilege as a historian primarily focusing on written texts that humans have left us, but they're also incredibly biased, so you have to have you have to be very aware when you read them that you do not just accept anything as a truth from them. Yeah. And so you don't even have that as an archaeologist sometimes. You just have what people left you, and then you have to like try and maybe compare it to some people that might live like this still today and see if anything could be made with that connection, so on and so forth. Okay. So it's a very, very difficult job, I would imagine. I'm not an archaeologist myself, but it's very hard.
Yeah. That does sound very hard. And there's also not a lot of funding,
no.
I'm guessing.
Depends, of course, on where in the world you are and what you do. And
But in this case, Vikings in Denmark?
I mean, I don't know the exact numbers, but they've become very popular recently, as you probably know from popular culture. Vikings are very, very popular right now. And like the series Vikings is a good example of like getting mass appeal. So I'd probably suggest I would think that it's much easier today than it has been before.
Look, you just mentioned that TV show, and I actually watched it a few years ago.
Yes.
How truthful is that?
I've been asked this question before when I did a Ross Viking tour at Moskva, and I had to be honest and come forth and say I haven't actually watched Vikings, and I still haven't watched Vikings, so I don't know very much about the historical authenticity. I haven't looked into it anyway, but I've heard, and this is with a big "I have heard" exclamation mark, so I'm not sure about it. That it's rather okay. In historical authenticity. There are, of course, things you have to do to make a story interesting, where if it would reflect real life, it would be incredibly boring. But I've heard it's pretty decent.
Okay. Yeah, because there was also like not a TV show, but I was reading about some like tales and this type of things that they wrote in the Viking Age, and they were also quite. How can I say? There was also a lot of things happening. Like there was a lot of drama and
Yes,
this type of thing.
you
So
have,
it's kind of possible that it's.
Yes, you also. I mean, it's of course when I said that the Vikings don't write a lot of down, I mean regular text, but they have written their legends down, which have survived on Iceland, which have given us a lot of perspective about who they are, and which helps us make these qualified guesses about what they were, what they were like, and what kind of tools they used, what kind of food did they eat, what was their religion like, which is very lucky. But they haven't really written down mundane things in any sort of way. Like they don't have a ledger of who lives in this city or something like that. Which
like not keeping records or anything like this.
No, it's a very strong oral tradition in a way.
Yeah,
and if you decide to write something down, it has to be very important.
Okay, is there a particular reason?
Those rune stones you can find around in
Yeah.
Denmark are very expensive to make for people at this point of time. You have to be very rich to have them made. So you better want something written down if you want to pay for it. And then you might probably pick something that's more important for you than maybe for a historian that wants to learn about a society.
Yeah. Okay, like more individual based.
Yes, it might be your deeds, or maybe one of your friends' deeds who fell in battle or something.
Okay, I just remember something. How were the cemeteries then? Did they have like I don't know, the rune stones or like infos on the people, or was it just like a common?
They buried their dead, but I don't think it's kind of hard because at this time we are the Danes are becoming Christian, and so we also have the first Viking church out here, which was located somewhere around Vor Frue Kirke today, and it's not like this that people change their religion, of course. And so when on the Jellingesten it says that Harald Blåtand and the old Viking king unified the Danes and made them Christian, it's sort of correct indeed, yes, but there's been a long process before where a lot of people became Christian. A lot of Vikings were Christian already at this point of time, so some of them might have adopted like Christian burial traditions, and while some might have stuck to a more Viking burial tradition.
Yeah, but since you cannot really dig in this part, there's not a lot of information.
It's hard to tell. It's probably, my guess would be that it's much like other places where it's been easier to find Viking graves in the same sort of way.
Okay.
So this was a bit about the city. Later we will go around and be at these exact locations. You'll probably get a very new understanding of what the city is like and where these things were placed, and might give you a new vision of what inner Aarhus is. What inner Aarhus's past is. But first, let's look at some of the objects inside here.
Yes.
So, as you might have noticed on the model, there was this ring road around the wall, and that would serve as like a highway inside of the city, because many of the side streets would be where people would dump their waste, and so you would walk around it would be kind of nasty in a lot of ways. So they had this main road here, which is kind of like the ring road in Aarhus today. As a joke, we call it the ring road 0.5 because it's almost exactly the same function as the ring road has today. An easy way of transportation to get around the city to where you need to go. And we found a piece of it right here. This is an actual piece from the old Viking ring road. And so we've made a recreation that goes all the way over here, which shows what it probably would have looked like if we were back in Viking times.
So it's not like this, it's
more flat, it would be flat because you would need to have carts to be able to run on. So it's like, this is like the vista, what it would look like.
Exactly.
And so we made a recreation, so it would be easier for people to like see what it was like and feel how it was. But the very interesting thing is that the space between these two lines where the cartwheels would be is actually very specific. It's almost exactly 144 centimeters, which seems like a very specific length to decide. But that's because it's been influenced by the Romans. And the Romans were like a superpower back in back in antiquity and up into the early Middle Ages of Europe. And so they also dominated trade and cultural aspects in many ways from a lot of the cultures they encountered, which also came all the way up here to Denmark, because this distance is exactly 2 Roman horse butts next to each other. So
Okay.
2 horses' butts.
Okay.
It's very specific, very weird.
Yeah. Is there any reason why they did like the double? Like why would they need
Because
more?
usually carts would have 2 horses that would pull them, and so they would be able to fit 2 horses exactly on the road, and the
Okay.
carts would already follow this created path for it.
Okay.
Which is kind of weird that horse butts of everything can decide how long a road should be. And it
Yeah.
still has influence today.
Oh, in what way?
In train tracks. Our train tracks, the width
Are exactly the same.
exactly the same.
No.
Yeah, it is. It's kind of, it's weird, right?
It's really
2
weird.
Roman horse butts, like 2,000 years ago, or maybe like almost 3,000 years ago, influenced this, and we still feel the effect today on our train
Okay.
tracks. Yeah, it's
That's
super
a
weird.
fun fact. Fun fact.
And so, some of these, like, this might seem like a minor historical anecdote in all of the things. It doesn't really matter in the big picture, but it can have like quite big implications, because when the Germans invaded Russia in World War II, when they came to Russian territory, the space between the tracks and the train for the trains were different. So the Germans had to readjust everywhere the offensive went, the train tracks, so the trains could run on it,
Yeah.
and which slowed them down. But that's probably because Russia and its culture hasn't in any sort of way, well, not as much like Central European cultures, been influenced by Rome. And so these small, minor historical anecdotes can actually change a lot of things in the big picture.
So this is like generally around Europe then?
Yes, this is very, of course, there are a few regional differences, like France and Germany has some of different, but generally this is like
Okay.
the length.
Okay, that is interesting. That was it for today. Thank you so much for staying with us. See you next time.
Ungdomsradio. 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 Ungdomsradio.